Waterfront real estate in Ocean City, New Jersey is some of the most sought after real estate along the East Coast. In today's video, I want to deep dive into the Bayfront market, and that's not just prices. I want to take you through everything from the depth of different lagoons versus the open bay, the pros and cons of single families versus condos, and duplexes on the water, and so much more. Before we dive right in, I want to give you a little bit of backstory here. So I had the privilege of growing up on the open bay right on 12th and Pleasure. And I got the glorious experience growing up as a kid and what it was like to live on the open bay. And having spent some time at friends' houses on lagoons as well, I got a sense for the differences here. And now, obviously, as a real estate agent, as an adult, I get to see some of those same patterns playing out with clients and coworkers of mine as well. So I really do have a depth of knowledge here that a lot of agents don't. Again, having the personal experience of living on the water for over 2 decades of my life, essentially, if you all combine it, along with the privilege of helping people buy there and sell there as well. So let's get to it. One thing that I want to start off with is pricing. So that is the big, hairy one, and let's get that right out of the way. So a lot of people who are interested in buying or owning on the water are simply not willing to pay the price. And I've had buyers over the years who are looking to ideally spend $1 million, $1.5 million at the most to get a nice single family home because they want their privacy, they want the ability to boat and do everything that the waterfront does bring into your life. It's really the Bayfront lifestyle. Unfortunately, and I'm going to share my screen here so you can see exactly what it is that we're talking about when we are looking at Bayfront real estate. So when we're talking about single family homes, and again, that's the bulk of the property type that we have along the Bayfront here and lagoons in Ocean City, though there are, again, condos and duplexes. Single family residential homes range anywhere from just under $1.5 million all the way up to almost $6.5 million. And that is not going to be decreasing anytime soon. So Bayfront prices have rapidly risen over the years. Hurricane Sandy really put a dent in them back in 2012, 2013, for about 5 years afterwards before things started picking back up. But since then, they've really taken off like a rocket ship. So if you're looking for a single family home along either the lagoon or the bay in Ocean City, really, I would be planning to spend $2+ million to get anything that I think would truly fit the bill, depending on what you're looking for. These ones that are under 2 million are really few and far between at this point. They tend to be close to teardown quality or on a super narrow lot in a strange location or something else. Now, as we get to the condos, things vary a bit here. And obviously, they're much more affordable, as is going to be the case with any condo that we're talking about. But these condo complexes range from having no water access, no boat slips, to having boat slips that are deeded with each unit. So if you're looking to get into one of these, you have to make sure that you understand what each complex brings to the table, if it's going to be a fit for what you're looking for. But again, from a price point standpoint, we're really looking at topping out around 1.5 million. There are a couple under contract here that are going to be closer to 2 million. These are newer builds, 6 bedrooms in a duplex. And again, just to backpedal, duplexes and condos are all included in this. Anything that's not a single family home is included on this page. And what these sales are, just to give you some reference here, this is everything that's happened since September of 2022 to now. So we're talking 14 condos or duplexes have sold, along with 13 single family homes. That's not a lot of homes. The demand is there. This has nothing to do with demand. It's all about supply. If we are going to go take a quick look, and we'll do this live, we have 7 single family homes out there on the market. One of them is my listing down on 50 Bay Road, where we're asking 7.3 million. But if you go lesser than that, and I wouldn't necessarily count this one as Bayfront, it's in a Bayfront complex. It does have access to the water, but again, you're looking $2+ million without really breaking a sweat. So that's what we have going on for pricing on the residential side and single family side. But if we're going to go to the condos, again, still only 12. There's really not a lot out there. And again, these are ranging really in the mid 5, 6, 7 up to 800,000 range. And these are primarily 2 and 1 bedroom units with a couple 3s in there as well. So with pricing out of the way, the next thing that I want to dive into, and this is going to get very nerdy here, so you have to bear with me, or the depths. So a lot of people may not care about the depths of boat slips, about the thoroughfares. But if you are a boater, and a lot of people who end up buying on the water here are boaters, whether that's leisure or fishing or anything in between, you should be aware of what these areas are going to look like at the lowest of tides, because it does range. And this is where really point number one is going to be the depths when we get into the open bay versus the lagoon discussion, which we're going to cover next. But what I have here, and again, this is overwhelming to me, and I've been looking at these most of my life, but this is a nautical map. And these numbers here are basically indicative of what the water depth is at the lowest of the two low tides that we get every day. Now, this isn't average, this can range, but it's to give you a sense of really what it looks like. And this is a great site. You can zoom in, you can see everything that you want, but I want to focus here on two of the bigger areas along the waterfront. We have the Lagoons and the Riviera section over here, ranging from 16th Street, where we have right at this green little island. I don't think my pointer's going to come through, where you see 3.9 here in the hole, going over to this little grid structure where it is the main Riviera. And within those lagoons, obviously, again, you see as low as 1 foot of water depth. And as high as 7.9 feet and 12 feet way back here. This is going to depend on a couple things. Number one, how recently were they dredged? The city over the past decade or so has implemented a dredging program where they're going to take the bulk of the mud and the muck that builds up and the sediment and get it out of there. So that's going to help with the water depth. But if you're looking at your individual property, those processes in that program doesn't cover individual boat slips. So even while you may be able to navigate out of those boat slips after the dredging has happened, you are likely going to be on the hook for dredging your own boat slips. And that could be several $1,000s per year, every other year. It really depends on your location here. But if we look at the mouths of some of these lagoons, because again, let's say you can get out of your slip, you can get into the main channel here, but you can't really get out because there's only 3 feet of water at low tide, 1 foot of water. 5 feet of water should be sufficient. But when we start talking about bigger crafts and some of these homes, right, when we're getting into the multi-million-dollar price points, depending on the lot size, you can have a 30, 40, or 50-foot boat on some of these. And depending on the whole depth type of craft that you have, it could be very tough to get out. And I don't know about you, I don't like to necessarily let nature dictate when I can do certain things that I would like to do. So that's where, in my opinion, the open bay really comes to show one of its main benefits. Now, once we see on the open bay, we're going to zoom in a little bit, and you're not going to see any measurements or readings close to these boat slips because it's pretty consistent with these main channel numbers, where you're going to have a substantial amount of depth. The home where I grew up in was about 20 feet of depth, even at low tide. So there was never any concern, even while we were swimming, diving in and getting stuck in the mud. If you're in the lagoon, it's a legitimate possibility that it's really going to change when you can swim and do what you want to do there. Now, we're crossing over the 9th Street Bridge. These gray lines are the 9th Street Bridge with lagoons, again, on either side. This one on the right-hand side is Snug Harbor, and the one on the left is Glen Cove. They don't have readings there, but I know for a fact that Snug Harbor is one of the lowest depth lagoons on the island. Now, we continue to move down the open bay, and again, we've got 11 feet. We start to get into some lower portions here around 2nd or 3rd Street. But as we get even further, we pick back up, we get towards the Yacht Club. I'm going to zoom back out just for reference, and the Gardens Lagoon. You see things pick back up. So again, for example here, just as a reference point that I'm familiar with, 50 Bay Road, about 8 feet at the lowest depth. And on a 90-foot wide lot, you can comfortably fit a very large craft there and not have to worry about it impacting your ability to get out into the inlet, to go deep sea fishing at any point during any tide, there's a huge benefit to that. Gardens Lagoon, we don't necessarily have any readings within the lagoon, but again, from a mouth of the lagoon standpoint, you would be limited at low tide to a depth of 3 feet. So now that we've gotten through the nerdy part, I want to talk a little bit about the difference between the open bay and lagoons. Again, number one would be water depth and kind of how it can control your lifestyle, when you can do the things that you want to do. The pros of the lagoons are that you don't necessarily have the wakes, the storms, and the battering that can happen to the bulkheads over time that you'll experience on the open bay. So there is some property longevity there. But the downside, of course, is that, again, at low tide, that bay smell, that mud smell can start to creep through a little bit. At low tide, swimming in that is a little bit tough. But again, back to the pros, it's so calm back there that you can float around on a tube uninterrupted. Whereas growing up, I wanted to float around on a tube, I had to make sure I was tied to a piling with a rope so that I did not float away. Now, one of the other components of these locations, again, most of these lagoons don't have very clear shots of, I'll say, the horizon line, where the sunsets in Ocean City are second to none. Whereas the open bay, you have a pristine open view over the marshes, the meadows, Cowpens Island, depending on where you are. And it's simply hard to beat that. And that's one of the things I know when I go back to my childhood home. It's one of the things I'm drawn to most, and most people are drawn towards, is that view. Whereas on the lagoons, you're typically pretty close in proximity with other neighbors, whether that's next to or across the lagoon, and you're looking at other people. So from a privacy standpoint, the lagoons are not as private as you typically will have on the open bay. Last but not least, one of the questions that I get most often when it comes to bayfront or waterfront living is it okay to go with a duplex, or should I spend up for a single family home? Most people don't want to pay the single family price, but they want the single family life. So with a duplex or a condo complex, you have to know that privacy is being sacrificed right from the jump. These duplexes, while you may have a semi-private deck off the back of the building, the dock and the dock space is typically shared. And you may be able to put a fence up down the middle, but in all reality, that's not going to really change too much. Whereas with the single family situation, obviously you have full control. Another huge question mark when it comes to these duplexes is dock and bulkhead maintenance. These are expensive maintenance items that come whenever you own waterfront property. And if you have the single family, obviously you get the final say of what maintenance you want to do, when things need to be replaced. When it comes to dual ownership or multi-person ownership, you don't necessarily have the power to do things when you feel they should be done. I'm aware of several duplexes that were overdue for bulkhead replacements, that were leaking a lot of the fill that is holding the house structurally in place out into the waterway. And one of the owners simply didn't want to pay for it, and it wasn't felt it was needed at the time. Now, those ultimately got resolved before there were any major problems, but it's a potential headache that you need to be aware of. Any duplex that you buy in Ocean City, you're getting into essentially a business partnership with somebody who you probably don't know. And there can be very good relationships, just like there can be very bad relationships, but it's a mixed bag. So if privacy and control are two of the primary objectives of you buying a waterfront property in Ocean City, which for most people, they are very high on the list, then a single family simply is the way to go. One final bit. Obviously, for everything we just talked about, those single family homes are going to appreciate at a higher rate than you're going to see in the condo and the duplex market. In general, Ocean City is bankable for appreciation. And obviously, different sectors, different property types do appreciate differently. So those single families are nearly as safe of an investment as you can find on the island, because you're not making any more bayfront real estate. There are very few lots that can still be subdivided at this point that are out there. So the supply is the supply, and these homes are being handed down multi-generationally, and people are no longer just letting them go. So if you can get your hands on one, I highly recommend you consider it and really make a sound long-term decision versus trying to save a buck in the short term and ultimately not having the experience that you're actually buying it for. That wraps up today's episode and video if you're watching on YouTube. So as always, I appreciate you hanging out with me. And if you haven't done so already, make sure you hit subscribe to the podcast or to my channel, whichever you are on, because I'm going to be talking real estate, Ocean City events, business owner interviews on a weekly basis going forward, and you don't want to miss it. So thanks again, and I will see you next time.